I think the most common mistake is that people are transactional, right? It's the nature of most sales is people are trying to close a sale. And you've already said that wasn't what you were trying to do. You were trying to do what was best for the buyer, the other person.
Hmm.
And that's what I've always done. And so if you're going out into the market with your handouts, wanting your hand to be filled or hands to be filled, it's the wrong approach. Really need to be going out and seeing what you can put into other people's hands. And that's the approach I've taken. Like, what can I do to help you? Right? This is not about me. This is about you. And so thinking about the other person above yourself and their needs above what you would desire, it's always going to be the best outcome, right? Even if they don't buy from you today, they will trust you enough to next time they have a decision to make, they're going to come back to you because you gave them good advice and they're going to ask you again. And the next time, well, last time I told you this other guy was the right solution, but in this case, I've got the best solution here. And if you can honestly say that, they're gonna trust you more and they're going to be happier with the decision.
You are listening to Power Marketing with Kevin Lee. Kevin and his agency Did It have helped thousands of businesses win through superior marketing, as have his books, articles, speaking engagements, and the e-Marketing Association Power Marketing podcasts. Here's Kevin.
Hi, I'm Kevin Lee with the eMarketing Association. I wear a bunch of hats, including running an agency, Did It, a supplement company, running a nonprofit, and an incubator as well. Another person who wears a bunch of hats is Carl Grant III, who's with me. And one of the things he did over the last 3 years was write a book. So let's start with that, and then we'll get into some of the other things that you do. What was the catalyst for you deciding that there was a book stuck inside you that you had to get out?
Well, that's exactly how it was. It was, we all have something in us that needs to get out. And for some people, it's a song or a movie or a playwright or whatever, but mine was a book. And I didn't even know, Kevin, what it was supposed to be called until the morning that I woke up to start working on it. And so it went from initially. So I've been in professional services, business development most of my career. In doing that type of work, there's certain things you can do, and I won't go do a deep dive on that right now. But I thought, I was the first person hired at PricewaterhouseCoopers to do that type of work, the first person in a law firm hired to do that kind of work. So I kind of created a space. And now all the accounting firms, or most of them, and the law firms have these functions. And I thought I was going to write a book on how to do that. And then as I thought about it, the same things that make me successful in my work life make me successful at home and in the community. And so I really did a pivot to a self-help book, and it's called How to Live the Abundant Life. And I really toned down the business stuff, even though it's very applicable to business. When I thought I was done with the book, Kevin, my daughter, my oldest daughter, said, "Dad, I read a lot of these books. Let me read this before you publish it." And then it added a whole year to the process of getting it out because she's like, "You got to be willing to kill your baby." And I'm like, "What are you talking about?" And she's like, "The last third of this book, like, you lost me. It's all business, and it's written for an extrovert, and I'm an introvert." And I'm like, "Oh." She goes, "Do you want people like me to read it?" And I'm like, "Well, of course." And she said, "Do you want like retired people to read it and like stay at home moms?" And I'm like, "Well, yeah, and so I had to, I mean, it's tough when your own kid tells you you got to scrap it. And so I literally threw out the last third of the book and rewrote it with her
Mhm.
guidance to make sure it was saying the right things. And you know what? It's 100% better as a result. And so it's gotten really good reviews. And I think when you write a book, you've written books, right?
Yeah, three. Yeah, four
Yeah, yeah.
actually.
So, well, I'm on my second now, and I think it's addictive, huh? So, um, you never really know, don't know who's going to read it and or how many people are going to read it. And I think the most surprising part of like writing the book was showing up and like I went to Saudi Arabia and I was I didn't realize that I was going to be handing out my book to the ministers of the various government agencies in Saudi Arabia. I was asked to bring them, and then I'm giving them to these guys. I'm like, holy cow! I had no idea. And one of the guys knew me by name and said, "I'm reading your book," and I'm like, "You're what?" It's just the weirdest thing. Or if you get on, like, I'm doing like one of these video meetings with a group, I was asked to speak, and there's somebody from New Zealand who had read my book, and she wasn't alone. There was somebody from another country, and I'm like, wow, this is wild. And did you ever have people reach out to you and like send you gifts? Like, I mean, I had the darndest things happen. It was I had a guy show up at South by Southwest, super nice guy, and he bought me a brand new Fitbit. He read my book and he knew I was into fitness. I'm like, wow, wow, like it's just it's just really like bizarre. There's good people out there. There's not so good people out there too, but boy, I like the good ones. And there's really kind people. And it was fun getting to know people who knew me. They knew me before I met them, and that's a weird feeling, right? So
Yeah.
yeah, the book does a lot to if you want to live a happier, more fulfilled life. And this is not about like getting rich. That's not a get rich book. It's having a rich life book, right? And a lot of the richness in life comes from human interaction and how you interact with your family, the community, people in the business world. And there's things that you can do and say that will cause people to react more, differently towards you. And think of it as like a modern day how to Win Friends and Influence People. Did you ever read that book?
I did. I did. I haven't read
I love
yours
that.
yet, but now it's on my hit list.
Well, I mean, that was one of my favorite books. I didn't read it once. I read it like three times because it's timeless. It's timeless stuff. And so I'd like to think of my book as being one of those, maybe 40 years from now, somebody will discover it and say, "Hey, there's really good content in here. Like you can learn from this." So
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. It's I have had people spontaneously thank me for stuff that I thought was inconsequential. Me having spoken on stage and given people tips on marketing, and or somehow people just decided I was mentoring them just because I spoke to them a few times at conferences and gave them advice and things like that. And former employees too who come back and tell you how influential you were on their career paths and stuff like that. So all that stuff is actually part of what I think translates into living that abundant life. So I'm glad that you wrote that book, and we'll be all be interested in seeing and hearing about the next one when that one's ready. Hopefully, you
the,
don't
the
have a 1 year derail on this
No,
one.
well, no, hopefully not. But I'm having fun with this one because I wrote the other one before AI was like mainstream. And so it was done the old-fashioned way. And so I know how a book comes together, but now I've got AI. AI will not write your book for you. So anybody who thinks they're going to get on like Claude or ChatGPT or whatever, and you're going to like have it write your book, no. I've played with it to see if it could, it can't. It doesn't. You've got to have the content yourself. All right. And so with the new book, and I don't even want to announce what it is yet because it could change. So I've learned, right? But I managed to put together an outline and, develop questions for the first chapter. And I spent 48 minutes. So I'm dictating my book this time using Plod, which is a recording device, AI recording device, and I spent 48 minutes on half a chapter. And it's way more content that you could ever put in. And so I'm using AI to help me take what is like too much information and condense it down. I'm going to argue with it. I mean, look, it's not perfect, but it's a first crack at what an editor would do, right? And so I've got an editor, and the editor isn't a person; it's a machine, And I've already found things I'm going to change. It's going to be at the end, it's going to be me because I'm the editor, right? But
Yeah.
but at least I took 48 minutes and condensed it down to 10 pages, and that's the magic of having AI as your, I don't know, not really a ghostwriter, like a ghost editor, if you will, right? So it's a different experience and it's fun. I'm having fun doing this. Before, sitting and typing when you get the writer's block and you're trying to write and it's hard, especially rewriting, a third of the book. That was really hard. But now now I might argue over, stuff that it left out. I'm like, wait a minute, what did you leave that out for? So it's if you haven't tried it this way, I encourage you to do it.
Yeah, I mean, I sort of switched mostly to podcasts, but I may revisit the book challenges because previously they were really, labors of love that took ages, like your first one did.
Yeah, yeah.
But maybe I'll think through whether or not I feel like there's another book in me that needs to come out and make its way into print. It certainly has some fun gravitas from the perspective of being able to show up at prospects and such and plunk a physical book on the
Well,
on
the
the
thing that you've done is you've interviewed some interesting people, and so taking the transcripts of all those interviews that you've done and condensing it down into some sort of lessons learned from talking to the most interesting people, there could be something there, right? Where you're
yeah, that's
taking content, you've
a
already
great
got
point.
hours of content that you can distill down, and I bet there's an AI tool that could help you distill
For
down.
sure.
This is, you can't publish, whatever, hundreds of guests, but you can distill it down to like who are the 15 most interesting guests
Yeah.
and based on whatever criteria you give it. And you can probably come up with some really good content that way.
Yeah, that's an excellent idea. I may challenge each of the individual AIs independently to see what they come up with
There you go. Yeah, I like to pit
after
them.
running the
I like to.
transcript. For
I
sure.
oftentimes will have five AIs open on my computers, and I'll pit them against each other just to have them argue with each other, and then I come up with the best answer.
Yeah, for sure. No, I find that as well. One thing I really would love to delve into, because you mentioned in our previous conversation how often you see business development and sales teams make some really, common mistakes. I mean, for me, I had an epiphany ages back when I suddenly realized that I did not want to shoehorn prospects into Did It, which is my agency, just because I could have, right? And I started to
Right.
have this philosophy, which actually ends up surprising a bunch of my competitors, which is, listen, if you're the better agency for this prospect, you should get them, right? And that like
Yeah.
surprises them. But I'm like, listen, if I try to, grab a client just because I have the opportunity to do so, and it's not a good fit, and nobody's happy, right? And you don't
No.
get that
You're
longevity
absolutely
that
right.
you would get.
You're absolutely
And
right. You're
so
absolutely right.
my whole philosophy has just sort of been to be helpful. It's almost like the scene out of Miracle on 34th Street, the first one, right, where
Yeah,
the
yeah.
Santa's recommending the other store, right, and how that creates positive karma, right? I mean, I do feel like that's super helpful, but and being helpful, I think, is the key there. So I'd love to hear your point of view on sort of common mistakes that biz dev teams and sales teams make that sort of really get themselves in their own way and how they can maybe change their worldview and bring themselves both monetary abundance and life abundance as a result of that shift.
Well, look, I think the most common mistake is that people are transactional, right? It's the nature of most sales is people are trying to close a sale. And you've already said that wasn't what you were trying to do. You were trying to do what was best for the buyer, the other person.
Hmm.
And that's what I've always done. And so if you're going out into the market with your handouts, wanting your hand to be filled or hands to be filled, it's the wrong approach. Really need to be going out and seeing what you can put into other people's hands. And that's the approach I've taken. Like, what can I do to help you? Right? This is not about me, this is about you. And so thinking about the other person above yourself and their needs above what you would desire, it's always going to be the best outcome, right? Even if they don't buy from you today, they will trust you enough to next time they have a decision to make, they're going to come back to you because you gave them good advice and they're going to ask you again. And the next time, well, last time I told you this other guy was the right solution, but in this case, I've got the best solution here. And if you can honestly say that, they're gonna trust you more and they're going to be happier with the decision. So that's the approach I've taken. So I worked for 20 years as head of global business development for an Am Law 50 law firm. We grew from 310 million in annual revenue to over 2 billion in annual revenue while I was there. And a lot of times we were not the right fit for something. There was a solo practitioner or some smaller firm, some less expensive alternative that was the better fit. And I would tell them that. But in other cases, I would say, this is not where you want to go with the low cost provider. You really need the best to do this because you're doing a bet the company decision. And honestly, I think you want to engage the right person, and we've got the right person for that. And so, when you say that and you're being honest about it, people know. And I think that's the best approach, Kevin.
For sure. Yeah. And I think there are a lot of lessons that can be learned there. I think the other thing that telegraphs is the fact that it's a longer term investment in a relationship, moving as quite far from transactional, right?
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely. It's not a transaction. It's I want a lifetime of knowing you and possibly doing business with you. And this is what it looks like. It means I'm going to be an honest broker here. And I'm going to tell you what I would want to hear if it were me on the other side of the table.
so in an increasingly cluttered market for pretty much everybody in sales and business development, and perhaps their boss's unwillingness to allow for the length of time, the sales cycle to be a longer sales cycle. How do you recommend that biz dev people sort of stand out and simultaneously sort of hit their numbers, right? Because they may not have the luxury of a corporate culture that allows them to build the kind of relationships, especially if they're new to the field or new to the roles of biz dev and sales.
It's hard. This is a hard question because I had a friend of mine, a friend from church, actually, to put it in proper context, who was seeking mentorship from me. And he had a job at the time where he was a sales rep for, I think it was a fintech related software company. And he was out, and he had to meet a sales quota. And I'm
Right.
like, all right, I understand you got to meet a sales quota. And there's some level of transactions that are involved with that. And he was a subscriber to the Zig Ziglar sales method. I'm like, all right, that works. That works for transactional sales, right? And in most cases, that'll work for you. But there was a situation where he had gotten to be, knowing a CFO of a very large company. And I said, all right, so not all of these are transactions, right? I mean, this CFO, this is somebody you want to know, beyond this sales transaction, right? Because he's a big time CFO. And I just wouldn't start with the sale because if he says no, that's no. It's like no for this sale, and like no, he's not going to take your phone calls anymore. Like so like think about what you're going to say to this person before you talk to him. And my gut tells me you want to invest in a relationship with this guy. And so what are some things you could do to be of value to him? And none of this was like stuff that was intuitive to him. I said, what do CFOs care about beyond this sales call that you're doing? They care about maybe they want to serve on boards of directors. Maybe they're thinking about what they're going to do after this. A lot of CFOs transition every 2 3 years, right? Like what is their next job? Do they want to speak at conferences? Do they want to be on a podcast? Like do you know people that could help this guy reach whatever his goals are? And so to think about what would be helpful to him, ask him, listen, and if you do this, he's probably going to, like, human nature is, if you're helpful to somebody, they want to reciprocate, and don't open the door to this transactional sale that you want to make unless he opens the door for you, because that would happen to me all the time. Like, wow, you've been so helpful to me. What can I do to help you? Like, what is it that you're doing? And in that case, you say, well, look, I'm selling this software product, and if it's a fit for you, fantastic. But if it's not, like, I'm more interested in you than making a sale. So, I'll tell you about it. But, and you know what? Sometimes when you take that approach, it has the opposite effect. They're like, no, no, no. I'm interested. You know, in that case, sell them your software, but and then you've built a relationship. And then the next time you reach out to them, it's not just to sell them a software product. You're reaching out, hey, I've got this advisory board role or this board of directors role, are you interested in this? And if they're not, you still get brownie points for making the effort, right? I mean, I can't tell you how many guys I've helped, or not guys, people help, with their job search. And you end up finding somebody a job. I can count on two fingers the people who didn't like reciprocate. I mean, out of 30 years of doing this type of thing, I can remember well, I can't even remember one of them. I remember one of them. I tend to forget these things. But everybody else was like, boy, thank you. And when I get on the ground, I'm going to look and I'm going to see if there's an opportunity to bring you guys in. I'm like, oh, that's really nice. Thank you. Or you follow up and you say, hey, let's catch up for lunch after you get your feet on the ground. And you do it, but you don't go and try to sell them. You go and say, hey, how can I help you in your new role? Are you looking to hire people, or what do you look, and you take that approach, and they're going to feel better about you, and they're going to want to do business with you because you've been a helpful person to them. So this
Yeah,
this just doesn't work in business. So this goes back to, I hate to bring it back to the book, but like going back to like it works at home, you have family members, right? I mean, if all you're asking for is like what your spouse can do for you, you know, that's a one-way street. They're going to get tired of it after a while. You've got to reciprocate. Can I bring you a cup of coffee? Can I get you a glass of wine? Do you want something to eat? Can I scratch your back? Like whatever you can do for the other person, you do that. And even if it's a small gesture, it's appreciated. And so you take that approach, in the neighborhood. We're watching our neighbor's dog right now. I would never let my neighbor pay me to watch his dog, but I guess my son has a different. I've got a 22-year-old son who's like, you can pay me to watch the dog. Yeah, but and he wants to pay somebody to watch his dog. I don't. He's my neighbor. Like I don't need your $50 or whatever. Like keep it. You know,
yeah,
but he can't help himself. He's like, I want to take you to dinner for walking minute, whatever. Like, I don't need that. So, anyways, that's it. It works. It works in all areas of your life, and that is the idea behind living an abundant life. It's when you do kind things at home, in the community, in at work, good things happen back to you. It just works that way. You reap what you sow. I mean, there's so much of this is like rooted in Bible verses that people don't even know are Bible verses. There's a Bible verse that says you reap what you sow. Like, a lot of people don't read the Bible anymore, but I have, and it's a good way to live your life.
yeah, absolutely. Those are wise words. It's interesting. I probably came to the idea of sort of the natural reciprocity that you didn't realize existed, right? Um, Perhaps more slowly than I should have, right? But once I realized that, I sort of changed my modality to try to become a natural connector, right? But I sometimes forget what people do and where they work, and LinkedIn helps me keep track of at least where they work and what they do. But like I found AI is actually helpful from the perspective of if I ask people what kind of introductions they need, I'll actually go, ask either one of my more common AIs because I have LinkedIn loaded into both, right? And I'll ask them, so who should I introduce this person to? Right. And it'll actually go through and comb the 30,000 connections and say, oh, okay, these folks. Then I'll have to see, okay, which of these people did I just meet once and which of these people do I actually know well enough where I can make the introduction, right? And it's become a little bit of an interesting power tool for me that I didn't initially expect. So for people who aren't natural connectors and can't keep in their brain their Rolodex, right, of potentially thousands of people, what tips do you recommend for them to sort of become that natural connector?
Well, I've done the same thing. So I exported my LinkedIn contacts, and then I have a project set up in Claude where I've uploaded my contacts. And so when I ask within this project, a question about who should I be talking to about this, it'll query my contacts to see who I know, which is really helpful. And a lot of times it'll know something about the person that I didn't know. Like you can't keep up. Like I don't
Of
have
course,
30,000, but I've got over 20,000 and it's still a lot of people. You can't keep up with that many people.
of
And
course. Yeah,
it'll be like so and so's here. But what AI doesn't know is like when somebody dies. Like, it's I had to go to a one of my colleagues, to find out one of the people that my AI recommended that I connect with. Yeah, he died this past year. I'm like, oh, I didn't know.
yeah,
It's not perfect. So,
sure.
you always have to double check what it tells you. Don't before you start reaching out to people who've passed away, check and see if they're still around. Right. I mean,
Yeah,
there's little things like that.
yeah, for sure. And sometimes the profile lets you know, right? And sometimes it doesn't, which is, I think will become an interesting problem for social media platforms on a go forward basis, right? Because you'll end up with this sort of moving group of folks that don't exist anymore that still, look like they do, right? Which is sort of an odd,
It is
conundrum
odd.
for the
And
social media networks.
it's something I've struggled with because I like to wish people happy birthdays and things like that. And if you wish somebody a happy birthday who's no longer with us and their spouse gets it, that's rough. It's
Yeah.
happened. It's happened. I'm still going by memory on on Facebook, for example,
Hmm.
um, because I'd like to think that the people I'm connected with on Facebook I know well enough. It's not like LinkedIn. There's less of them on Facebook. Still a lot. So I'm still going by memory there. But on LinkedIn, I can't. Like I do delete contacts that have left us because I don't want to run into that same problem. So yeah, it's this is going to be a growing problem, especially guys in our generation as opposed to our kids. I mean, they don't have to worry about this for a while, I hope.
Yeah. So let's switch gears a little bit to, within the professional services category, the lines between sales and marketing are sometimes pretty blurry, right? And in law firms, until they professionalized their biz dev
Yeah.
process, they had the rainmakers, right? And these were lawyers, right, who essentially ended up just due to the fact that maybe it was a meritocracy and they just happened to be really good at it, they became the rainmakers, regardless of whether they worked on the business or not. And so, and often they were loath to invest in marketing at all, right? They're like, oh no, we just, we're a sales driven organization. But
Yeah.
clearly there's value to marketing in law, for example, especially on the consumer side. If you drive down any highway, Morgan will tell you, at least around here, that he's a big law firm with Morgan and Morgan, but there are others as well that are regional. So yeah, I mean, what is your thinking on the sort of CFO role and how they should help the CROs and CMOs to sort of find that proper marketing mix and sales mix given the overlap?
All right. Well, so you've used three there's a CFO, CMO, and a CRO. So most law firms don't have CROs, chief
Right.
revenue officers, right? And I actually wrote an article that it was for American Lawyer, but I think it got published in Texas Lawyer, on the future of the marketing and business development organization. And my argument was that they are going to be led by CROs. And I've already seen this in a few situations, but it is not universal. And so what has happened in the law firm world is that they've taken people who are marketing people, and marketing is way different than business development as you and I would think of it, right?
Yeah.
They are not client-facing people. Most of them have never spoken to a client, right? And then because law firms want to be with it, and they'll throw the marketing and business development on their title. And I'm like, as somebody who came up on the other side, just pure business development. In fact, when I started out, I didn't even report to a chief marketing officer. I reported to a partner. So it
Right.
was a whole different world, right? I was operating very much like a partner that did not have a billing rate. And
Yeah.
so it's totally different than somebody who's worrying about the website and like pitch materials and things of that nature, like responding to RFPs. That's a whole different skill set than somebody who's going out and hunting, if you will, and like meeting with would-be clients and doing the types of things we're talking about. And so I don't know that that's the right person to be leading a group like that. I had a chief marketing officer towards the end there. I mean, long end. I mean, like 12 years that I reported to, and she was great because she left me alone to do what I did, right? And she didn't micromanage me. She knew that I knew what I was doing, and she left me alone to do it. And that's fine. That works. But if you're going to have somebody leading that organization, there should it. I really think the chief revenue officer, and it's hard to like promote that within an organization because the chief revenue officers that we know are not in law firms or even professional services firms. They're selling software or hardware or something else, right? And so you almost have to find that person from outside of the services business and say, look, we need to have KPIs on everything we do, right? And that's not the way they think in a law firm. Law firms are very qualitative, or they're not quantitative at all. And so, and I came from PricewaterhouseCoopers, which is a quantitative firm, to a law firm, which is not a quantitative firm. And I tried to introduce quantitative ways of thinking about things into a law firm, and it was rejected like foreign matter, right? I mean, it just didn't fit within their framework of doing things. And so that's where the CFO comes in because the CFOs care about numbers. So having the CFO on your side helps to wrap it full circle. So I hope I'm kind of answering your question. I really think you're going to have the future of these types of organizations. You're going to have a C-suite person who's going to be a chief revenue officer who's going to tie everything that's done in marketing, in business development up under one umbrella that ultimately leads to revenue. And hopefully that person isn't a transactional person. They need to be a relationship oriented CRO. And so this is where it gets really tricky. And you really need somebody who thinks the way you and I think to be talking about who the right person is to come into this role, right? Because just taking a guy who selling hardware or software isn't going to be the right person necessarily unless they've operated on this level where they're developing relationships with executives at other companies and they're relying on those relationships and not transactions to drive what they're doing together. That's the type of person that you need in this role.
Yeah, let's look at the sort of budgeting of sort of trust building at the brand level conversations, right? Because obviously an individual biz dev person and a team of biz dev people and salespeople, they're going out there and they're having conversations and hopefully they're being helpful and being connectors all along the way, and they're building personal trust. And to some extent, maybe there's a bit of halo effect that goes up to the brand. But at the same time, the marketing investment in all sorts of things, from sponsoring golf outings and golfing, broadcast on TV, right, gets the brand out in front of those same people that the sales teams are going to call on, and potentially allows it to make it easier for the business development person because there's a little bit of brand trust already there. But that's an area where CFOs sometimes are a bit resistant, right? They're like, well, wait a minute. I mean, for us to put this kind of money into just getting the word out about the company name, is that really going to help? So how have you broached that conversation to the extent that's ever come up in your case, right? In the cases of obviously PricewaterhouseCoopers and other big brands, that was there before you got there, right? That somebody had already invested $1 billion into building the brand, but you were able to capitalize on that. But if the brand is newer, right, or there's a rebranding, which sometimes happens in accounting and law, where all of a sudden the firm name changes, and you throw away all that old branding, and you have to almost start from scratch. So
Yeah.
those are all sort of fairly big decisions, but can really make the biz dev team's life a bit easier because it's sort of the trust, the halo effect of that brand trust.
So when I joined PricewaterhouseCoopers, this was 28 years ago, and Pricewaterhouse and Coopers and Lybrand were two separate brands, and they were coming together for, PwC wasn't it? Well, it was not today we know the acronym, everybody does,
Yeah.
but Price Waterhouse Coopers together was an odd brand. And but nonetheless, they were both branded, whatever they were back then, Big Six. I can't even remember, we're down to four now. But it was easier reaching out to people when you're with a big brand like that.
Yeah.
We had this survey. It was a venture capital survey called the Money Tree Survey, and part of what we did was we called all of the investors to verify their investments, and it was really just an excuse to talk to them, and then we called the CFOs of the companies or CEOs in some cases, and we would verify that before we put the information out there. But we got touch points with all those folks, and they were always happy to take our call because we were calling from PricewaterhouseCoopers. When I joined Cooley, and this was 2002. There was no brand, not on the East Coast. Cooley was a
Mm.
West Coast law firm, and it was 310 million in revenue. I mean, it was small, compared to what it is today. It was over 2 billion in revenue when I left. And so I remember going to New York City, and we didn't even have an office there yet. I was kind of the advance party in New York City, and I would meet people, and I'd say I'm with Cooley. It was Cooley Godward at the time, and they would say, "You mean Cleary Gottlieb?" I was like, "No," and nobody even knew who we were. Everybody knows who we are today, but they are today. I'm not there anymore. But that was an interesting experience because we built the brand. We
Mm.
we built the brand, and so now they've got a brand, but they didn't when I started there, and it was built over 20 years, and we didn't have a big marketing spend. This was shoe leather, and so I'd like to tell you that, yeah, everybody took our calls. No, they didn't, we had to really prove ourselves. And now that I left them 4 years ago, and I've done my own thing over the years, and now I've joined a team. Actually, the guy who hired me, the managing partner from PricewaterhouseCoopers, asked me to join his team. He's a partner of mine now, at a firm called AcumenX. Once again, that's not a household brand. It is I mean, it's a boutique national consulting firm. But in all the years that I've been doing this type of work and being associated with brands, good brands, I've created somewhat of a brand for myself. And
Hmm.
and that is helpful because when I'm reaching out, people want to, I'm reaching out and setting up meetings in another city, and people know me from the work I did at these other firms, and they're happy to take the meeting, not because it's some random person from AcumenX, it's because it's me, and they know me from the work I did and how I treated them, all the stuff we've been talking about all along here when I was there. And so they're all happy to meet. And so, there's something to be said for a personal brand. And when a company hires somebody into a role like the role I have now, thinking about, is this person going to be elevating our brand, or are we going to have to spend money to brand this person, right? And fortunately, in my case, I've built a brand amongst the people that I already know, and that's helpful.
Yeah, for sure. So for companies of a mid-size, right, that are perhaps on the earlier stages of trying to, you know, get up and to the right at a reasonable slope, and they're, considering hiring somebody, and they're trying to decide between, a person of your stature, right, who's got the combination of the Rolodex, the relationship, and the personal brand, or two of junior people, right? The how should they think about the math, right? Because obviously they could afford two junior people, or one of you.
Well, but there's other solutions, and some of these are solutions that I've actually suggested. So everybody's got to start somewhere. So investing in a junior person and growing that person up, it's great. But having that person mentored by somebody who's been there, done that, and knows how to do it, and knows the people that this person needs to know, that can be helpful too. And so in some of these situations, like for example, I have a law firm in another city who who it was funny. The lawyer sent me an email saying, I want to hire my own Carl Grant." Like it's a I'm going to Google him, you know. I mean, it's so I'm like, okay,
Make sure
I'm
you
flattered.
trademark that. Get the trademark on that.
So what I offered him is I'm like, and that makes sense, right? Like he says I can't afford you, and I'm like, maybe not. And I'm not really looking to move to your city and do this full time, but what I can do is I can help you scope out the role, like what this needs to look like. I can help you recruit this person because I've done that, for decades. So I know how to do that. And then I can help train and mentor this person and make sure that they're producing for you. And so that is the plan I've laid out. And I think that can work as well. And so it's kind of a hybrid option where you're having your cake and you're how do you say I have my cake and I eat it too?
Yeah.
Right? You get the expensive person, but you're not paying for that full person. You're paying for a part of that person, and then you're building that younger, less expensive resource up. That might be a good way to approach it.
So, final question, like what else should people be thinking about as they're, looking at this, next year, right? And this new tool set in their, pocket, which is the AI of whichever brand they prefer. How should they be thinking about their next year and planning for that?
Well, AI is going to become part of everything, just like the internet is part of everything. I mean, look, we're doing this over the internet right now. I mean, I remember, like the first startup I joined was the first company to put video over the internet. Now it's just part of our life, right? We have it on our phones. It's not so innovative anymore. AI is going to become the same way. It's just going to become embedded in everything we do. And so I see AI today taking productive people and making them 100 times more productive.
For
Right.
sure.
And that is what I'm experiencing, like from day one, right? It is augmenting me, right? I have, for example, give you a real example. And if you haven't done this yet, you should be thinking about how you can put AI to work for you. So I have an agent I developed. I developed it on Claude, and it is something that is set to go to work for me 5:30 on Monday morning before I'm logged on. And it's going out and it's telling me based on what I'm looking for, and I don't need to get into details of this, who would be a good prospect for me for the type of work that we're doing. And then it's going to grade those prospects, because I've got a list. I've got my prospect list is right here. It's color coded. You see the green, the yellow, and the orange. I don't know if you can see that, but I've gotten to the greens. Like I can't even get to the yellows, right? And
Right.
so that is based on the likelihood of them being ready to do the type of business that we're looking to do and where I actually know somebody, right? As opposed to don't know somebody. And so it'll come back to say if you only do three things with this all this information, here are the three people you need to talk to. That's really useful information for a busy person, right?
Yeah.
Because I wouldn't even have time to go and even think about who these people are on my own. But now I know. I know because it did the work for me. And so, for example, I had I'll give you another situation, right? I've done law firm business development now for 24 years. You think I know everything about it, but I had a gentleman who I mean, the people that come to me, they're not the people that don't know what they're doing. They're the people who are the best in the world at what they do, which I think is really cool because I tell my wife I'm talking to like the rainmakers of rainmakers. Like these people are like, like one of the guys I was talking to about helping him with like prioritizing his to-do list. He's now got promoted to like run the whole firm. He's got 36 offices under him. I'm like, huh, so these are the people I'm talking to. So this guy is in charge of the Supreme Court practice for his firm. And I don't know the first thing about, Supreme, like we never, like Cooley's got a Supreme Court practice now, but I didn't deal with the Supreme Court. So I don't know, like, how do you do biz dev for a Supreme Court practice? And so I had to really noodle over this because I didn't want to look like an idiot in front of this guy. And so we have a lawyer as part of the AcumenX team who's operated at the highest level, partner at DLA, big firm. And so I said, tell me how this works, And so we noted over. He said, well, the Supreme Court cases come up through the appellate court system. So all of those cases that he's going to be hoping to work with, they're already bubbling through the system today. I'm like, oh, that makes sense. I didn't even think about that. And so I started thinking, well, so I'm leading the AI advisory practice of this firm. I'm like, let's think about how AI can help with that. And so I got to thinking about what I do for myself, right? And so I set up an agent to look at the appellate court system based on what this guy told me that makes a good client for him and his practice area. And I had the agent identify which companies coming up or cases coming up through the appellate court system should be on his radar. And the guy's super duper busy, this guy, and he sent me an email today saying, I don't even have time to breathe right now, but I'm going to get back to you, because I can tell I've surfaced like two cases that weren't on his radar that should be, right?
Right.
And so that is the type of thing that if you're not thinking like that today, you need to be thinking about that, right? Because even this guy who's like top of his game, he realizes that somebody else with these tools is going to come up and eat his lunch if he doesn't deploy them, right? And so
Yeah, for sure.
so I hope he engages me to help him, stay ahead of the curve. And that's what everybody listening to this podcast should be thinking about. How does this apply to your life? And I'll give you one other illustration. My son, totally different line of work he's doing, but he will set up AI to go to work for him, and then he'll go to the gym and work out. And he's figured out how to make it like work LinkedIn Salesforce Navigator, populate his CRM, and generate emails for him to review before they go out when he gets back. And in some cases, he has it send them, and he already has meetings set up when he gets back from the gym. That's the type of thing that you can do with AI. Now, I got all of his prompts, and it took me about an hour and a half, and I couldn't figure out how he got his AI to do what. So I'm gonna have him sit down and show me because this is next level, right? I got kids that are doing next level AI stuff, but I'm gonna learn, and I'm gonna be able to do that when our clients ask me to do it for them. So, all right.
Yeah, well, fun times that we live in for sure. When we wear our biz dev hats. Appreciate you jumping on and sharing all your wisdom with myself and with the listeners. Thanks.
Kevin, it's been a lot of fun. Thanks for having me.
Kevin Lee's Power Marketing is available on all your favorite podcast networks. Kevin loves helping businesses excel at marketing. Having marketing challenges? Just like Santa in The Miracle on 34th Street, if Kevin can't help you, he'll know someone who can. Find him on LinkedIn, subscribe, or follow.